Everybody, can you hear me okay?
What? Sorry.
Oh, Steve. Good evening, my name is Justin Saltzback. I'm the town administrator for the town of Middleton. I think I know a good handful of you. We've had interactions at various points over the past 10 months. So if you don't know me, it's nice to meet you and feel free to grab me afterwards. As you know, there is an event at 7 o'clock for the candidates night right down the hall. So we're going to try to maintain a relatively quick schedule this evening. As you know, on May 14th, upcoming at the Howe Manning School, we have our annual town meeting. In response to that, we have 23 articles in total on the warrant this year. There are two in particular that we wanted to have this additional forum for. I'd say maybe a little stickier and less straightforward. So we wanted to give them a little additional time than we typically have at the pre-town meeting to talk about. First is Article 7, which is the fiscal 25 budget operating override, and we'll do that first. The second item is Article 23, MBTA zoning. So if you're here for just one or the other, please be patient and we'll certainly get through it. So I'm going to do my best to not read this to you slide for slide, but I did provide a handout if you want to follow along, so we have some good charts and graphs. The first item here, just to help give you the building blocks, is what is Proposition 2.5? So that was a state law that was enacted in 1980. It basically sets what's called the levy limit. That's the maximum amount we're allowed to tax every year. What we're asking for in an override, if you hear that word, what is an override? That is a request from the citizens of Middleton to override that levy limit, to go above and beyond what we are statutorily allowed to tax. And so a typical format for that ask, which is what we're going to be doing this evening, is laying out a dollar amount and then explaining why we landed on that dollar amount, what the need is. And so a big thanks to different board and committee members and staff members here this evening that will help answer some of those questions on behalf of their departments. The next page, you're going to see a line graph with a red line and a blue line. So what we're trying to illustrate here, among other drivers, and I'm sure you're tired of hearing it, but inflation is a major factor, and we're understanding that it hits your wallets personally, and it's been a struggle to make household budgets balance. On the municipal side of things, we're not immune to that either. And so what this chart is illustrating is that if you were to look at the overall overall budget every year, taking out debt is a factor. So if you're just looking at what it costs to run our operations, what we were looking at in fiscal 2021 was about $36,800,000 and change. Our proposed fiscal 25 budget without debt is about $42.5 million, and that's under the limitations of Prop 2.5. So that would be the blue line that you see on the chart. What we've seen realistically, though, out in the real world, outside of Prop 2.5, are years where inflation ran as high as 8%. And so what we did was look at the, according to federal data, what the true inflation rate was year over year and what that would have brought us to. And so rather than the $42.5 million, it would have been closer to about $44,800,000, the difference of about $2.3 million over time. And so what does that mean to you? That means that we're trying to provide the same exceptional services, but at a much lower cost, which just is not financially feasible. So that's how we got to that point. If you're to turn the page, there's a couple important numbers here that I want to drill down on. So the first is how much are we asking for? I think that's the most important question. I could bore you all day with inflation statistics. The request is just over $1 million, and we're going to break down what goes into that $1 million for next year's fiscal 25 budget. What's the total amount of the request? So the total amount of the override request is about $1.8 million. We get to that number by taking the million and then adding about $760,000 for future capacity. What is future capacity? So what we're trying to project out here is that when we go for this ask for this override, we don't want to be able to balance the budget for next year and then have to come back the year after and say, hey, sorry again. And so what we're looking to do is project out, based on feedback from those that help run our town operations, what are some expenses that we anticipate to come down the road, realistic expenses. And we made it abundantly clear throughout the budgeting process that's been running since around the holiday season that this isn't open season. This doesn't mean throw in your wish list, that everything you want, you pile it on, and we're gonna hammer it through on this override. We wanted to know bare bones, what do you need to make this town run? And so that's what really helped inform this number. It's important to note that that additional 760,000 or so does need approval, so year over year. So if it's approved at town meeting and it's approved at the ballot this year, that doesn't mean that that money can just be spent. That means that for the fiscal 26 budget, the fiscal 27 budget, we still have to come to annual town meeting. We still have to come before the voters in Middleton, and we still need your approval to spend that money. The next page is a breakdown of that $1,033,500 request. So on a high level, and I'll allow Michelle Aiken to come up and speak to the schools a little bit, but they're asking for $375,000 for the items listed there. On the town side, we're asking for $658,500 between 5 separate items. And so those 5 items are 2 additional police personnel, 3 additional fire department personnel, a facility maintenance personnel addition, and that's funded for half the year, and I can explain that a little bit more. 2 part-time library personnel, and then all of the additional costs that come with those personnel adds. So, health insurance, Medicare, all of those additional benefits, and so that gets you to that $658,500 number. The facility maintenance personnel, there's a slide, but the reason we funded half a year is that there was a lot of debate back and forth among town staff, the finance committee, and the select board as we made our way through the budgeting process, and we were in agreement that we didn't need to fund that position for an entire year. We're trying to coordinate with the eventual completion of the new facility over at the golf course. And so we didn't want to hire somebody just to have them sitting there waiting for it to open. So we're timing that for substantial completion for that project, is the reason we did it that way. Michelle, would you like to speak to the schools a little bit?
Hello everyone, thank you. So the key drivers for the school department's part of the override is really operating costs of just keeping the buildings up and running. But what this override also does is add some additional services to the kids. For example, we have 6 kindergarten classrooms. This override will allow us to get 6 full-time aides in all of those classrooms. We're also adding in a new special ed teacher, and we're really in the mindset that this teacher could help us save money by keeping those special needs kids within the district. We're adding in a new coding class in the specialist section in the upper elementary at Hal Manning. We're also bringing the specialist teachers like gym, music, phys ed up to full 1.0 FTEs. We're also adding a new classroom section in the 3rd grade as we see that it's needed due to student population. This override really keeps the schools moving forward. We know that education is changing, things are, with technology, things are constantly moving, and we want to keep up with that and keep our schools top notch. I know that I moved here because of the schools. My daughter's at Hal Manning, my son is now moved on to Masco, but they've all had really excellent experiences at both elementary schools, and I want to keep it that way for future generations. So are we taking questions now? Okay, are there any questions? Yep.
What's a coding class?
So that'll be more of like computer coding, like, I don't know how to code, so Scott, our
software
superintendent.
development
Yeah.
programs like coding for computers.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
I also don't know how to code, for the record. If you would go ahead and turn the page, what's the impact to your taxes? I think that's kind of the most important bottom line number. And so when we're looking at the proposed increase for fiscal year '25 for the override, it would come out to 32 cents per thousand. So by example, an average home in Middleton is considered to be valued at $935,000 for an average single-family home. So that would be representative of about a $295 increase for fiscal year '25. The total amount, so when we're talking about future capacity as well, that total amount would be $580 spread out over that 5-year period. So it's not that 580 plus that 295. That 295 is part of that 580 number. The question has arose, does the budget balance without an override? Yes, and that's something that our team is very proud of. We were able to put forth a balanced budget, but we had a lot of discussion about organizational need. And I think as a town organization, the priority from the standpoint of fiscal responsibility has always been to try to make this thing work for the smallest amount of money as we possibly can. And the town historically has done that year over year since the last override 8 years ago, where they committed for that. Somebody remind me, how long was it supposed to last?
5 years.
5 years, and it lasted 8. And so we're still very much committed to that, and the same is for this here as well. But part of the downside of that is year over those 8 years, when there was an organizational need such as we need to add 1 firefighter, it just wasn't the time, right? But that can't always be the answer year over year over year. Eventually you fall pretty significantly behind. And so if you were to turn the page, you'll see a blue line graph, and we're going to show a little bit of data here. So what we're looking at is trends in Middleton for EMS call volumes from 2019 to 2023. And what we've seen over that 5-year period is a 25% increase in calls from that time period without any increase to public safety personnel staffing. That's a trend that we anticipate to continue to go on. Chief Lacosa, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to the fire EMS side of things.
Good evening, everybody. So I would like to just briefly discuss the kind of the struggles that we have as far as our operations. So our department currently operates, we have a combination department, so we have full-time staff and we have part-time staff. And what we found over the years is that we're having an increased difficulty finding part-time personnel to do the job. So years ago it was, gave someone a set of turnout gear, said, okay, there's the fire, go put the water on it. But today it's a lot different. There's a lot of training that's involved. They have to go to EMT school, they have to go to fire academy, there's a lot of monthly training. So we're having trouble finding those people that want to do this job. So actually what we've done is we've turned to full-time firefighters that work elsewhere. They come in and they work as part-time personnel, which is nice because they're trained, but Middleton Fire is never going to be their full-time priority. Their full-time job's always going to be their priority. So we have difficulty finding people to work the weekend shifts in particular because they don't want to work Friday or Saturday night at Middleton Fire because they have to work next weekend at their full-time job. So it's hard finding those people. Another thing that made us what worked well for us for years was callback. So what happens is when the bell rings or the ambulance transports to the hospital, we would typically have people come in from home to answer the call, to staff the second or third piece of apparatus. Today, a lot of the personnel don't live in Middleton, no longer live in Middleton. So roughly 25 years ago, 100% of the staff lived in Middleton. Today, it's about 7%. So people don't live in town, they can't respond to the station in a timely manner to get to the second or third apparatus to, answer that second medical call. So we are looking to increase our staffing, our full-time staffing, so we can rely less on the part-time staffing, so that we can strengthen that foundation, so that we have 5 people on duty, for instance, so that we can staff that second or third piece of apparatus and answer those calls in a timely manner, so that we can, provide an adequate service. Does anybody have any questions? Sure.
I was wondering if you could share any of the reasons behind the massive increase in calls?
So part of the reason increased mutual aid. Okay, so I know like last year, mutual aid to Danvers, Peabody, North Andover. So EMS has struggled for years since COVID, trying to find people that want to do the job. It's difficult to find those people. So what happens is if, there's multiple calls, they need mutual aid resources, they'll call Middleton to go to another community. And to be, we've done the same here. We've had to call in mutual aid resources to come into our community and help when we have a second or third call. So it kind of goes both ways, but I would say that's probably the bigger reason. And the bottom line is we're living longer, so our elderly population has increased. So, that's a big part of, who we serve, is the elderly.
Is there a cost to that mutual aid? Like, are there additional cost savings to not have to call on mutual aid?
So if we go to, let's say, Danvers for mutual aid, we do the transport, we do the billing. Likewise, if Topsfield or another community comes into our, to do our calls, they would do the billing for the patient that they transport. And I think another thing to consider is, I don't know if anyone's been to an ER lately, an emergency room. We're finding longer wait times at the hospital. So we go and we have to wait for a bed to open up. Our crews are tied up there longer, so it means that truck's out of service for a longer period of time. And it's just, really healthcare is a mess today, unfortunately.
Are calls from the jail increasing? And what percentage of calls in 2023 were at the jail?
So I would say that the calls have been pretty consistent over the years. I want to say 12 to 13% of our transports are from the jail. But it's been pretty consistent over the years.
One more question. Do you anticipate being able to easily find these 3 additional firefighters?
So, good question. So I know that it's, we have a pretty strong network. I know what a lot of departments have been doing is they go to the paramedic schools, the programs that are offering the training, and they'll, offer, they'll put handouts to the students there to try to, get them interested. We use social media, we do a pretty aggressive advertising campaign to try to find people, but yeah, that's, one thing we have to contend with is trying to find people that, that want to do the job. So.
Did you convert any of the part-timers? Like, do you offer a more competitive wage
So,
than some other towns?
so we have, like I said, a lot of our part-timers work full-time elsewhere, so that's their priority. We do occasionally get the part-time person that wants to be a full-time firefighter and they work a lot of hours. It's all about timing. If we have an opening, we'll hopefully grab them, but a lot of times they get grabbed by another community. So it's really all about timing. Question?
Yeah, I was just, as a follow-up, wondering, is it mostly emergency calls, or are we having more fires?
So a big part of what we do is the ambulance. That's a big part of our calls. We do have fires, not like we used to, but I would say EMS is a big part of our job today, no doubt. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
In addition, we have Chief Sampson, if you were to turn the page. One of the issues that we're looking at as well in terms of adding 2 members to the police department is if you're looking at comparably sized communities, every community is different, we know that, but in terms of similar size and similar makeup, if you were to look at staffing numbers, Middleton is second from last, only to Boxford from a staffing perspective. So Chief, if you'd like to speak to that. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm Chief Sampson. Thanks again for everybody coming out tonight. One of the reasons, that is one of the reasons we have been traditionally understaffed when it comes to the national and state average. And we could augment that staffing with part-timers. And that's basically been the way Middleton's handled that. Post-commission, state training has been changed in the last couple of years. They're basically phasing out part-time officers. We used to be able to send them to a reserve intermittent academy, which was a part-time academy. We could bring them on part-time. They would augment the team as full-time positions opened up, then we could make them full-time and send them to the full-time academy. Well, the post-training standards have changed that. There is no more part-time academies. Anyone that works now in the state of Massachusetts as a law enforcement officer that has any kind of arrest powers now has to go to a full-time academy. So they're basically phasing out part-timers because if you do have a part-time or somebody that wants to come onto the job, they have to go through the full-time academy even to work part-time. So it's a 6-month academy, that takes a lot of commitment. People don't do that to be part-time officers, they do it to be full-time. So even if we were able to get someone on part-time that's full-time certified, it's only a matter of time before another department's gonna take them full-time. You know, around the country, we're no different in Massachusetts, but policing has taken a hit in the last few years as far as recruiting and retention, people that wanna come into the profession. So the candidates out there as much as they used to be, we don't have the ability, like I said, to bring them in as a part-timer and eventually make them full-time. So what we're looking to do is to add 2 more full-timers that would basically replace what we used to use as reserves. Plus, as an agency, we're moving forward. We're more of a full-service agency. What I mean by that is we have more people doing investigations, we have more specialized training, so we can offer a better service. Because basically what I believe is when someone comes to the police department, we should be able to handle basically any problem that they have as an agency. And that's what we're working towards, and making it a full-time position gives us a better opportunity to do that. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was just wondering, can you paint a picture of the triage situation that the police would have, like with the current staffing, the kinds of requests that come in versus if you had more people to help, like what kind of would that picture look like?
You mean the type of calls for service or the problems that we see?
Just more like what kinds of calls might not be addressed if we didn't have more police to cover?
Okay, the biggest thing would be, what we see in smaller towns is the burglaries, house breaks, car breaks, and without the capacity to solve those, because we can't turn those over to the state police. State police have, you know, they do a great job of what they do, but theirs is basically homicides, major crimes. They leave that on the departments to be able to handle. So if your car gets broken into, some departments will come, they'll take a report and then move on. What a full-service agency will come process that scene, process for prints, then start looking for suspects, be able to identify suspects, work with area agencies to find that person, being able to do a competent interrogation, and be able to successfully come to a conclusion with that case. More than just, because we used to be basically a patrol function, and basically just reports in traffic. Now we can do in-depth investigations. Yes?
All right, this is kind of an obscure question, but by the way, first of all, thank you for everything that you do for this town and produce.
So no.
But, like, we talked about the fire department and they do mutual aid. Is that something that the towns can all share in, like, as far as, you know, if somebody's a police officer, let's say Peabody, can they part-time in Middleton?
They can, but as Chief Okos spoke of, it's always gonna be their secondary employment. And it's difficult because police work 24 hours a day, so they work different shifts. So when you call and need somebody immediately, a lot of those people just aren't available. You know, and then like they said, if they're gonna work their days off, they're not as reliable often when they have a full-time commitment. We can't order someone in from their full-time job to come here. We do have mutual aid, so if we have an accident, we can call the next town over, they can send an officer to help us through that situation, and then they go back home. Massachusetts is kind of unique. There's not a regional policing. You know, the counties, a lot of county-based, so we have much bigger agencies. Mass has always been individual departments, so they can't all work together like a large agency. State police used to take on a lot of that, but you know, their roles have gotten bigger in different things that they have to do as well. So we're getting to a point where we're relying a lot more on ourselves. Yes?
Could you speak a little bit to any increase that you've seen in police calls and any maybe increase you've seen in the need for proactive activities, similar to the way the fire chief did?
Yes. It's one of those, when you're doing just a patrol function, that there's gonna be crime out there that goes undetected, because you really don't know what you're looking for. When you have more specialized units, when you have more specialized people, they can go out and actively find those crimes that are going on and take a proactive approach, rather than a reactive approach, is wait until a hot car gets broken into, wait until a house is selling drugs and gets burned down. So there's different ways you can proactively look for crime that's out there that's not rapidly obvious to the general public.
Have you seen more calls though in recent years, more need for police services in
Yeah, as the town grows, as the 114 neighborhood driven down there, knows that the traffic hasn't gotten better. So those calls for service always go up. There's certain things that we've investigated that were there in the past that we've now been able to address and take to a next level. A couple of them are ongoing right now. Sir?
Chief, I don't know if you could maybe touch on the recent legislature with the act to reform policing that took place, and the impact that that's had on part-time.
And that's one of the things I was talking about, the police reform is when they went after the training saying that part-timers training was inadequate. And what they believed was that if you get pulled over in the city of Boston, or you get pulled over in the town of Pittsfield, the officers should have the exact same amount of training. So it shouldn't matter where you get pulled over as to the level of competency of all the training that the officer has. It's a great system, don't get me wrong, I think it was well needed, it's been coming for a long time, but they forced it upon us pretty quickly, and without really the avenue for us to adjust to that. It was, you have this year, and this year, and that's it. So that's been a tough one for us. But again, in the long run, it will make us a better profession. I think it will strengthen the profession. We'll have better trained people, have more competent police departments. But it has been a strain. Yes.
Will this allow a better presence on River Street and Liberty Street? The people that live on Liberty Street right now basically can't walk their dogs because they could get killed. Same thing with River Street on the peak times because they're used as cut-throughs. Is there any?
Well, one of the positions that I would fund with this is a full-time traffic enforcement officer. And that's exactly what they do, is just concentrate on traffic. Because right now, when you have a certain amount of people, they're a jack of all trades, they have to handle every call that comes in, they have to handle every spot. And we're down 4 people right now, 3 are out IOD, and 1's down because of a retirement. So the more people you have on, the more people you have on shift, the more people you can assign certain areas to crack down on the complaints that come on, or the issues that are happening.
Yeah, because it's really dangerous.
No, I agree. Well, thank you all for your time.
Thank you, and we're gonna round the corner here because we're halfway through and we wanna flip over to MBTA zoning. So the last 2 items you have under Article 7 is, for the library, 2 part-time personnel. So you can see, as we demonstrated, from 2019 to 2023, there's been over a 17.5% increase in the total amount of hours worked weekly. So what we're trying to do is help provide some relief there by having part-time individuals to help kind of absorb that trend, because after a while, it's just not a realistic trend. And then, yes?
I have a question for you. The override on Article 7. The town of Middleton and the school are together in the override. It will be voted on together. They're not separate.
Correct, yeah, it's all
Why are they
one
not
thing.
separate?
It's just the way that it's laid out in the article.
Okay.
And then the last piece on this end is
Excuse me, Jesse.
yes.
That question, can it be separated?
At this point, it's the way the article's written. Madam Moderator, I would defer to you on that if you want to speak to it.
Well, that's not a yes or no question.
So
What's the answer? That's the
Will you
answer.
modify
Will you modify and separate it?
I would not.
Oh.
If you always have an opportunity to submit an amendment, motion to amend an article, and if you're considering doing so, I would suggest you get it to me and the town clerk as soon as possible, so it can be reviewed for legality, because if it's gonna be done on the floor at town meeting, it would require a recess for legal review.
and so I would add.
But it becomes very complicated because there's also a ballot question.
Are they always together? Like if like town is looking for override and school is looking for override, are they always together?
that's a question for time.
Sure, so I can answer that. No, they're not always together. And part of the conversation that happened during the budget process, between town staff, the finance committee, and the select board, not to speak for those boards, but, there was an agreement that this is all the need, and it's all together, and we didn't wanna pick two sides off of one another. Yes?
And that was the way it was structured 8 years ago, when the town and the schools needed an override, they were together.
So past practice additionally.
The other important thing to note is when you separate them, what happens is you're pitting one against another. So when you go to town meeting and you go to the polls and you're reading it, and so fire and police are vying against the school, that's not really fair to anybody to be pitted against each other and pleading for what's needed. And so in 2016, we blended it together and made it fair for all of you. It all falls under operations. And so it was fair. So it was all or nothing.
Okay, so
And you
it's
also
all
have the
about-
library
All or
rather
nothing.
than this and other personnel. not just-
Yes.
I just have a follow-up comment that I don't believe it's pitting one side against the other. Like, for example, if the town doesn't want the whole package, but they would like part of it, it's better for the part that the town supports to receive that support than nothing to get supported. That would just be my comment.
Understood. And then just one last slide, I'm gonna open it up in general if there's any questions beyond that. So a full-time maintenance person, this came up in the budget process last year and it was put off, it came up again this year. And as I mentioned, we compromised and broke it down to funding starting in January of next fiscal year in an effort for cost savings. There are plenty of studies out there, but regarding preventative maintenance, it happens a lot in smaller to mid-sized towns, which Middleton falls into that category, is in a unfortunately short-sighted effort to save money in the short term, you end up running into maintenance issues that cost you way more money in the long run than if you just hired somebody that could oversee that. And so that's the intent of this. The stat we have here is that preventative maintenance can save operational costs by 12 to 18%. Obviously that varies, but the goal here was trying to get somebody on staff that can identify $1,500 issues before they become $15,000 issues. So a small leak in the roof, for example, is something you can address quickly instead of letting it sit for a year for next year's capital plan and then it gets into the walls, et cetera. That's just one example. And so they would serve all of, not just the new public safety facility and the new town hall / community center, but also the Flint Public Library and any other municipal side buildings. Are there any questions on that? Okay. In general, before we move on over to MBTA zoning, which I have a feeling a chunk of you are here for, are there any other questions about the override? Yes?
So does the amount of the override include things that we might ordinarily see as individual warrants? In the town meeting, I'm sorry, I haven't read the book completely yet.
Sure, so if you were to turn to the slide that has the positions listed, so it's a yes and no, and I'm gonna explain why. So it does include things that you typically would see in a warrant article as part of the general operating budget. So if we had the levy capacity to have those additional 3 firefighters or 2 police officers, for example, typically you would see that in the general operating budget every year. But because this is above and beyond the levy limit, we're calling it out specifically for the sake of transparency.
Not rolled into an override instead of going in that other direction.
Yeah, and then if this does get approved, once again, it would have to be on town meeting floor and at the ballot. But then that's built in year over year. So those positions, you're not gonna see them called out like that in fiscal 26 if it passes. It would just be rolled into the operating budget.
What about, I don't know if this makes sense. What is the amount then of the other warrants that are relevant to these items?
So in terms of,
What other requests are there that are in separate warrants other than what's rolled into the override?
okay, so there's the general operating budget and then there's capital requests as well. So the warrant, which is available on the town website, breaks all of that down. Do you want me to, I mean, I could run through page for page, but.
That's probably a question that's more relevant to the pre-town meeting than here.
Sure.
I would just thought you might have a number off the top, but
I don't, but I'll have something for the pre-town meeting. I'll rattle it off
Until the next slide.
quickly, thank you. Yes?
So, earlier I heard that, you know, Middleton's changed, we have a lot of more elderly population. Have we thought, and I'm assuming that we're not talking 90-year-olds, I'm talking, you know, seniors, such as myself. Like, have you ever thought about, you know, maybe to volunteer, maybe, you know, for some of the school programs or some of the, not the fire, maybe not the police, but, you know, some of the maintenance things, and maybe giving them a huge tax break on their real estate taxes,
Yeah.
things like that, like, you know, in other words, leveraging the town and the community, bringing the community together to kind of offset some of these issues that we're all having.
So there is, that currently exists, a senior tax work-off program, which is pretty common in municipalities. I wouldn't say it's a huge tax break, but it is a tax break, and it does allow us opportunities. It's I think what you're touching on is it's a twofold benefit. But one of the more important ones is that it kind of helps integrate those members back into the community. It's a vulnerable population, so it is an important program, but it's something that we currently utilize. But that said, there are limitations. So for example, we wouldn't send a senior tax work-off helper onto the roof, for example, for like bigger scale maintenance things, but you know, painting a fence or things like that. And we do have individuals that help with those type of things. It helps us defray costs, it keeps them active, and gives a little tax break on their tax bill, so it's mutually beneficial.
I wonder if you could just kind of like maybe promote it a little bit more, or really kind of, you know, take a look at it, because I hear like, you know, there's tons of school things, this would be perfect opportunities for them to, you know, to assist in the school system, and then maybe think about, you know, maybe being a little bit more lucrative about tax break. Make them want to do it.
Sure, I can't speak for the school's operations, but I know when it comes to police and fire, obviously, like, it's not something we can do, but we're continually looking for people to participate in that program, and we can continue trying to push and get people involved. Your thoughts not lost on me, so. Way in the back.
Just as a point of reference, our tax work-off program also includes veterans, and we have, for every person that wanted to participate this year, we found a position. So it is a rather robust program, and it is fully, we're maximizing the capacity. So for every seat that was available, we had someone participate this year.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, and thank you for everybody that participated in the override conversation, there is another event starting at 7, and so we're gonna go through the MBTA communities. It is at the back end of this presentation. It's fairly quick. You know, don't get me wrong, it was a pretty complicated piece of legislation, but we've discussed it pretty in-depth as a community. And so what we're trying to cover this evening is ultimately where did the town land in terms of a response to this piece of legislation. So a quick overview, the MBTA Communities Act was a law that was established that required 177 MBTA communities in the Commonwealth to have zoning that provides for at least one district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right. It cannot have age restrictions and shall be suitable for families with children. It must have a minimum gross density of 15 dwelling units per acre, and it must partly be located within 0.5 miles from a commuter rail, subway, ferry, or bus station as applicable. And so, in this particular instance, for Middleton, we were considered a MBTA adjacent community. It's something that was established by the state, and not to minimize it, but that's the hand that we were dealt. And so as a community, what we discussed is, well, how can we respond to this? And so the first step is, what are the requirements for Middleton? And those are determined by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. And they determined that Middleton needs a minimum multifamily unit capacity of 750 units and a minimum land area of 50 acres. And so what that means basically is not that we have to go out and build 750 units and they're gonna show up tomorrow. We need to take an area that could already have units in it, which is the case that we did here, that would count towards that total 750 number. Realistically, 5-10 years could go by and you could never have those 750 units. And that's the important part they always stress is You're required to zone for it, you're not required to build it, or necessarily permit it. So be mindful of that. And if you have any questions as we move along, feel free to jump in. Oh, there we go, yes.
It mentions a business district as the focal point for those units.
Yeah,
Where is that?
sure, so, and that's actually the slide upcoming, so maybe let me run through it and then we'll take the questions at the end, then. Maybe that makes more sense. Just a second, Susan. Okay, thank you. So what happens if this is voted down at annual town meeting? And there's a lot of conversation about this. I know we all read the news and you've probably seen other towns that have voted it down. The important takeaway there is those communities had limited options in terms of their layout. I think among the conversations with the planning board that were held in public meetings, Middleton was kind of in a lucky position in the way that we're laid out, where our town center is relative to where a denser zoned area is, relative to where the highway is. It's a little bit of a one-size-fits-all piece of legislation. Every community is a little different, however, and organically, the makeup of Middleton, it kind of helped us come to something that was low impact. And so the strategic process to respond to the mandate was 2 public meetings in November 2023 and January 2024, culminating with a March 12th, 2024 public hearing, at which I saw some of you there, so thank you for continuing to participate in the process. And ultimately, the planning board came to a recommendation, and I'll hand it off to the chair, Brian, if you'd like to run through it.
Sure. Evening, everybody. So, yes, the legislature of Massachusetts did a blanket type of situation here, which doesn't fit Middleton pretty much at all. And I would say that's probably true with a lot of communities throughout Middleton. We run on septic systems, we don't have a lot of sewer access. This was, in my opinion, poorly designed. But because of that poor design, we benefit in the fact that we can turn it into more or less a nothing sandwich. The recommendation of the planning board was to, if you turn it over to the maps, to put this 50-acre zone around the Ferncroft area. And we did that for a number of reasons. Number one, since we don't have any MBTA buses, trains, or anything else, we put it near a highway so people could travel and they wouldn't have to go through the center of town in order to get where they're going, because we all know what 114 looks like at either end of the day. We also put it close to where the tall Ferncroft Tower and other buildings are, which have, 12 stories over there? 17, okay, better yet. The law says that they can make multifamily units that are 3 stories tall. What contractor, what developer is going to want to destroy a 17-floor building to make a 3-floor building? It's ridiculous.
The state mandates it.
No. The state doesn't mandate it. The state is mandating that we are overlaying our existing zoning with this new zoning. Now, a guy who comes in, let's say somebody has a piece of property there, the seller could sell it to the developer or the new owner, and the new owner could choose whether he goes with the old way or the new way. And anybody who's got any business sense will not put a 3-story building up where a 17-story building used to be. Doesn't make monetary sense. So our putting it over here is keeping it away from town center. It's putting it as close to any sort of transport or roads that we can give them, because until the state decides to give us a bus or anything else, we don't qualify for any of that stuff. So we're putting it over there in the corner, away from the town center, and in the end, it is the feeling of the planning board, the zoning board, and I won't speak for other boards, I'll speak for the planning board, but it is the planning board's opinion that because of the density that already is there, this is not going to happen for quite a while.
But what happens when it does happen? And why wasn't it placed at the watershed instead of here, where Ferncroft Road is such a small road, 750 cars times 2 going up and down Ferncroft and Village Road will create such a health hazard, accident hazard, that, what were they thinking? Was that the only place it could have gone?
Well, the only other place it could have gone was the former Bostic site, which is now contaminated. Thank you very much, Bostic. So
Make it a Superfund site and have the feds come in and clean it up.
that's great, but we have until January 1st to make this decision.
It was on Bostic before, you had it on both, split between Bostic and Ferncroft.
Yeah, until we realized that, A, the Bostic site, even if we didn't need to clean it up, would cause more traffic on 62, and then subsequently 114. And this was the only way we could isolate it, where A, we could put, you know, multi-unit buildings, or multi-use for that matter, put, you know, little stores at the bottom of the buildings or something, but it was going to be the minimal impact to the town as a whole.
In the process, the people in Ferncroft and on Ironwood, we're taking a major hit with the potential for our property to be devaluated if someone even considers developing it. And where are you gonna put 750 units in that area?
First of all, again, it's the mandate to zone for it, not to build it. And secondly, it's a money-losing situation until somebody manages to find enough property over there to actually build something that's gonna, look at developers, they wanna make money. That's their reason d'etre, right? That they're not gonna build something smaller where they can build something bigger.
But if we zone for it and the state says 2 years from now, you now have to develop that, then we have to go and develop that? Is that?
Please.
Is that
Sure,
the-
sure, so that's an excellent question.
I guess that's.
So the state can't mandate that legally. So
They
that-
cannot?
They cannot, that's not something they can mandate. So I know that for MBTA zoning, the feeling is it's a bit of a state overreach, and I'm not gonna entirely disagree with that. And I think that's part of the reason why it's rolling through the courts right now. But the argument can be made, that it is within the state's purview, to have the municipalities create this type of zoning. It is not anywhere in Mass General Law in the state's purview to force a town to physically build or develop an
So
area.
they can force us to zone it, but
Yes.
they can't force us to build it?
Correct.
For now.
No.
Until they say.
I mean, that's the way the law is
until they say
written.
they'll rewrite the law. They'll say, you shall do it.
I can't
They'll
speak
give
to a
us
hypothetical.
5 years.
So, ma'am, there are other questions in the back, I don't mean to cut you off.
That's
but
a
we-
conversation for the legislators. I mean, we're as low on the totem pole as anybody else in that one.
Kind of a two-pronged question. The first one, are other communities doing it in these sort of highly dense areas that people don't think will be developed?
A lot of other communities, to my knowledge, are doing exactly this if they have the correct space. There are, I think it's what, 3 or 4 communities now that are deciding to butt heads with the AG's office, and they're gonna lose all these benefits from the state. We as a town stand to lose up to and or around $5 million in grants from the state, because the AG's office will swish us off just like they did with Milton. And then that's more tax money that we're asking from all of you guys. It doesn't make any sense. Susan,
Right here.
Susan.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
We don't have MBTA, and I thought I saw that it had to be 5/10 of a mile.
Yeah, exactly. We're an MBTA adjacent community, as they're calling us,
But
which
they
means
say
that the
you
town
have
next
to
to us,
be-
what is it, Peabody, that has a rail line? Yeah.
Right, but it said 5/10 of a mile, and that's more than 5/10 of a mile.
Which is why I stated in the very beginning that I thought this legislation was poorly written.
So
They thought they could put a blanket statement over all the towns, and it's not gonna work here. It's not gonna work in a lot of places.
But we don't even,
But they do have bus service to Daris Plaza.
Yes, but again, that's not Middleton.
That's how it's in with less than a half.
Right. That's determined by the state. Yes, ma'am.
The stop, cross the point,
it's from the central town or
from the zone.
I just want to make one comment in regards to something somebody said about other towns. We had a meeting today, and our town council was there. And as a matter of fact, he mentioned that other communities are putting their overlays in dense areas, including his own town. So it is happening in other towns.
It makes it less likely that any developer would wanna tear something bigger down to put it up. It's crazy. Ma'am?
So you say, we are adjacent, does that mean that we're excused from even having to consider this? If we're not?
Unfortunately not. The legislators did not see that.
Okay, so my second follow-up question is, to me, this seems like, maybe a good time to push back against this overreach instead of sort of semi-complying, hoping that we can, not actually give it any power And as far as losing grant money usually comes with strings, and I'd rather be creative as a town and learn to live without this aid that comes with so much strings than sort of complying our way into greater and greater hands in our town.
Well, here's the thing, we did discuss that aspect of it, and we came to the conclusion that not only are we putting $5 million in grant money at risk, strings or otherwise, but we're also putting ourselves in the position of needing to come up with at least hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to try to go up against the AG's office of the state. I've been watching Milton very carefully, and they're spending money hand over fist to fight this. They really, really want to fight it. And in their particular situation, it may be better for them to fight it than to not fight it. I don't live there, but they don't have the extra space or the composition of a town, and they have sewer. You know, there's a lot of things that they have to fight for that we don't. If we had a sewer system, this would be a whole different situation.
Well, I don't know that the sewer system seems to make a difference to me. I think that massing
It's huge.
massing so many people, cramming 50, what does it say, 15 dwelling units?
If you look at anybody who works with septic and sewer and that sort of thing, they're gonna tell you that if you put too many bodies in houses on a certain amount of land, okay, that septic system will fail. This is the reason why the guy over at Angelica's, who's developing Angelica's, he wanted to do, what was that? 200 units, and then he was gonna have to put this massive waste processor underneath the ground, and that was coming out to millions of dollars for him, and he was like, nope, not gonna do it, because it was just too much money.
I agree that our town can't support that many people.
Precisely, and so that's why we're putting it where it can really, hopefully, equate to nothing in the end. I can't say nothing forever, but we certainly know that for a number of years, this is gonna be a nothing.
Is it true that the existing home dwellings that are currently there qualify and satisfy?
A number of them do, yes.
So there wouldn't be, they're not knocking anything down. We're zoning it on it, where 75% of it is already satisfied with the number of dwellings. On the closest location to, you know, anybody's MBTA, which is ours, across the street, across
Right.
the one. And again, if you're gonna you wanna put a septic system in Middleton, you need an acre.
Yeah.
All right, and that's just for a family, you know, a 4-bedroom.
Yeah.
If you, by the way, what, 750 on a 50 acre, just do the math.
Exactly.
They would have to violate their own health and safety codes when it comes to septic systems in order to do that.
Precisely.
Is there sewer up at the Ferncroft though, up in that area?
There is a sewer connection up over there that we have yet to negotiate if we had to, which at the present time we don't.
But do those buildings run off of
There's-
Yes, but there's no additional capacity, so somebody couldn't come in and tap
So
into
they're
it.
not tied into the sewer, so it's not like you could put another like.
Right, there's no ready-made system at all.
Correct. And I just want to note the candidates night is starting in a couple of minutes. I don't want to rush this.
Any other questions, sir?
Do you have any homes in that area, single-family homes?
Single family, off the top of my head, I could see maybe 20. I'm just looking at the map here on you. Yeah, but these are all multifamily situations, so, you know, single families would never come into play, at least according to the law. Yeah.
Of the 750 that we have to have, how many do we already have?
I don't have that.
Yeah, I'm not sure, however many are in Ferncroft and a couple of the other buildings, but it's more than we had before, according to their rules.
Right, no, I went to all the meetings and I thought the reasoning was really brilliant, actually. But I just, they keep saying 750 units. We already have some.
Yeah, it's minus the 101.
Minus the existing, yeah.
I'll get that number.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we banged our heads against the wall for a number of days trying to figure out how to make this as least impactful on the town as possible for everybody.
But that
And
wasn't fair to those of us on Ferncroft.
it's only not fair if they actually build something, which in all likelihood, they won't, because it'll be not worth their money. It won't be worth their money to develop.
What, the single families that are in that area,
They're not included.
they're not, that was my question,
Nope.
because someone.
If you look on the page with the maps,
I can't see that.
It's on the
It is a
website,
little
it's bigger on the
Microsoft.
website.
anything else? Anybody else? No? Okay, I'll hand it back. Thank you very much.
All right, so that concludes it for the evening. I appreciate everybody coming out. I know they're kind of dense, complex topics. We're gonna be doing an additional meeting covering all 23 warrant articles upcoming on Tuesday, May 7th. So feel free to join us. And if you have any questions between now and then, feel free to grab me now or any other time at the office. Thanks.